morning. Welcome to a hopefully not too long video on expectations for instructions. Um, I'll go ahead and start recording. We'll go through the PowerPoint first, and then we'll take a look in the actual classroom after that. So basically, I just want to go over the things that you'll need to be aware of and the things that you'll need to do in order to meet the expectations for the graduate program. I do review classes every quarter, which is a lot more than probably most schools do, because we only at this point we only have about 25 faculty, so it's not too arduous. If we had 50 faculty, I would probably not be doing it every single quarter. But I want to make sure that you guys are comfortable with what the expectations are for as far as grading and participation and things like that. So, the first thing to discuss are timelines. With office hours, you'll need to have one office hour per week, and that office hours should be published in the classroom in your announcements from the first day of class. Please make sure it's during a time that's going to be easily accessible for our students. And a lot of our students are Mountain Standard Time. So I know that I have faculty who are East Coast, I have faculty who are Central Time Zone, but because the majority of our students are Mountain Time Zone, please make sure that you add 2 hours to that you could be 1 to 2 hours ahead of the rest of our students. So 6 p.m. Central Mountain Time is basically where the earliest you would want to hold your office hours during the week, which would be 8 p.m. if you're on the East Coast or 7 p.m. if you're Central Time. You can also hold them on weekends if you like. Again, you don't want to hold them at 7 o'clock on Saturday morning because that would be 5 o'clock in the morning Mountain Time, and even I don't want to get up that early. You're welcome to hold more than 1 hour. What I often see is faculty members may hold like an hour during the weekend, and then they may hold 1 or 2 hours during the evening during the week, and it's not a bad practice. I mean, I would actually like to see that. I don't require it, but the way that I see it is that you're going to be in the classroom most days anyway. You know, particularly every other week when you're grading. So I try to make myself available during that time anyway to my students, because if I'm going to be online grading papers, I can just as easily, open my Adobe Connect room and let students know that, hey, if you want some help, I'm going to be online. Just, come by my Adobe Connect room, and just, when you get there, just announce yourself. And what'll happen is Adobe Connect will give you a little message in the corner of your screen to let you know that there's somebody in your room. And so I find this to be more effective than just setting an hour where you're going to be doing nothing, because even though you have office hours, the majority of time students do not show up for office hours. I would love for them to show up, but I would, if they're not gonna show up and you have to be online, we may as well make those things happen at the same time. So, I always make sure that I'm available to students, particularly during the times when I'm grading. Um, and then for students, that they see that as my instructor being accessible, 4 hours a week rather than 1 hour a week. But in reality, if I'm going to be there anyway, I may as well, be available to students. um, as far as grading goes, grading, we're pretty generous on grading deadlines, definitely more generous than any other school that I've worked for or taught for. Usually, the learning plans will either end on a Monday night or a Sunday night, depending on the quarter, and if there were any holidays. So, from the time a learning plan ends, the clock starts ticking, and you have 6 full days to post your grades. Um, I don't recommend taking the full 6 days if you can avoid it, because students, of course, are eager to get their grades back, and it's just prolonging agony on our part if we take the entire 6 days. But at the same time, I want for you to leave quality feedback. So the most important thing is that you leave really good feedback within those 6 days. I would rather you take 6 days and leave really good feedback than get it all done in 2 days and leave, you know, poor feedback or very uninformative feedback. So the other thing I recommend is with grading, try to get the papers graded first and do the discussions afterwards, because that gives the students more time to use the feedback that you leave in your grades on their next paper. If you are doing discussion boards first and then you post grades for the papers on day 6, then they'll have less time to use your feedback to hopefully improve on their next paper. When it comes to final grades, we generally have about a 36 to 48-hour window to turn around final grades, but most faculty, which may not sound like a lot, but most faculty members don't really need that much time because the 11th week of our class is usually a very light class. Students will, the only assignment they'll have is they may have a reflections discussion board or they may have a brief reflections paper. And when I say brief, I mean like maybe 500 words. So that 11th week is really about giving you time to get your grading done. Also, if there are things that you need to wrap up with your students, if there is missing work that you agree to take, which is up to you. Um, but that last week, you don't expect you don't have any seminar recordings that week, and for those classes where you have a final paper, the final paper really should be due the first day of week 11 and not the last day of week 11. So if you do have a final paper, contact me so we can discuss a deadline. It's really up to you, but I want to make sure that you, because this is what usually happens, is that faculty are so generous with that deadline for the final paper that they wind up painting themselves into a corner with grading. So if your class does have an LP6 or a final project, I would recommend do not make it due on the last day of class. Maybe make it due halfway during week 11, so maybe on day 3 of week 11 would be the latest that you want to accept it so that you have time to leave quality feedback when you grade. With as far as communication goes, email should be answered within 24 hours. There is a way, and it's relatively easy, and I'll show how to do it in a different video. I may already have the video done actually, but you can easily forward your emails from from your D2L account to your phone or to your personal email. One thing that I do recommend if you do that is when you reply to the student, if you can copy yourself, because part of my review process is I go into your email, and I apologize for that in advance. That's just part of the job. But what I'm looking for is I want to make sure that emails were replied to within 24 hours. And if you're answering emails only from your personal account, I don't think that I will be able to see that that email has been replied to. So what it will look like is that, oh, this instructor is getting 20 emails and they haven't replied to any of them. In reality, you've replied to all of them, but because you were using because you had forwarded your emails, it doesn't record them in D2L. That's why I recommend BCCing or CCing your own account, so that when I look in your email, I can see that you reply to those emails. The other thing that I recommend about emails is to always close the communication loop. So if a student emails you for help and then you talk on the phone, please follow up with the student, and this is for your protection. Just a quick note saying, I just wanted to verify that we discussed this on the phone. Or in summary, I want to verify that you will have until Friday to turn in the assignment. And that's just so if a student says this person, this instructor never replied to my emails, I can say, yeah, yeah, well, I see that you guys discussed this on the phone. I want to make sure that if you're doing your job and you're replying to emails in a timely manner, I want to make sure that we have a paper trail. In case any student says no, they were ignoring my emails. 99 times out of 100, if a student says that the instructor's ignoring their emails, well, I'm not going to say 99, 95% of the time, it's not true. But I just want to make sure that we have the paper trail so that I can quickly put that argument to rest with the student. Okay, and then really, you're expected to be online Monday through Friday. If it's the first week of a learning plan, you're probably grading and you're on the discussion board. If it's a second week of a learning plan, your grading should be done from the previous learning plan and you're probably just participating on the discussion board. We do want you to, um, we undergrad wants instructors to log in at least once during the weekend. And if you're not forwarding your emails, I do want for you to log in at least once during the weekend. But if you're forwarding your emails to your personal account and you're addressing your emails that way, I don't really see that you should have to log in during the weekend. Some instructors like to, they like to, because they're on the discussion board and they don't like things to get out of control, so they want to make sure that they're monitoring the discussion assignment, and that's a great practice. I highly encourage it. But I totally understand that because I teach as well, that my weekends are my time. I forward my emails to myself, but because I teach for undergrad and I know their expectation is that you need to log in at least once during the weekend, I log in during the weekend. So again, I'm not requiring that you log in on Saturday or Sunday if you have your emails forwarded to a personal account or to your phone, just to make sure that you're addressing the emails. Okay, that should be it for that slide. Oh, no, LP seminar recordings. So, I sent out a video on your seminar recordings. You are welcome to do all of your recordings now. If you want to knock them out before class even starts, that's fine. But please don't give all of the links to your students yet. Make sure that we want to make sure that the link to the seminar recording is due on the first is available to students on the first day of a learning plan, and also the assessment that goes with it. And remember, the assessment should be something relatively brief. Maybe a worksheet that they complete as they watch the recording, maybe a 5 question quiz, but I mean nothing that is going. I mean, I don't want to give them yet another paper to do, because I want them to focus on the big paper that they have due at the end of the learning plan. And yeah, and that's about it for that one. Okay, so on the discussion board, faculty members are expected to be active participants. So again, this is something that you'll do Monday through Friday when you're on when you log on to D2L. I try to just to make it a habit of posting to at least 2 to 3 students every time I log in, and that's the rate that I try to keep throughout the week. And I usually try, I try to go to the students who posted first. I want to make sure that by Friday of week 1, everybody who has posted their main post, I want to make sure that I've given them some sort of feedback, particularly if you see that there are areas to improve in their discussion post. So, for instance, maybe they have some writing errors, or maybe they forgot their citation. I mean, if they have material that should have been cited and there's no citation, you're not supposed to grade it. So, at the same time, you don't want to fight with that student 2 weeks later when you post their grades. So it's a good opportunity for you to give students feedback, and it still gives them enough time so that they can improve their posts before the deadline. And for me, that's been the most successful um, the most successful process, because I have no desire, like I'm not waiting to see a student fail. If somebody forgot their citation, as much as I am neurotic about academic integrity, I'm not good. I would rather say, hey, I think you forgot to cite your sources, and then give them the opportunity to fix it. If they don't fix it, then that's on them. But the other thing is that if one student is making an error, like if one student forgot citation, they're probably not the only student in the class who's done that. So being on the discussion board gives you an opportunity to sort of deal with deficiencies and issues in a timely way, so that when you let the students know, and you can let them know via email, particularly if I would say that if you feel like it's an issue that might be sensitive in nature, or if you get the sense that that student might be a bit more sensitive, or they may not take constructive feedback in the nature in which it's given, I would definitely email that person to let them know, hey, you forgot your citation, or hey, your content looks very similar to something that I've seen online. Um, I would do that via email. But for instance, if you are noticing that several people have not cited their sources, in that case, what I do is I just post I post a thread on the discussion board saying, letting students know, hey, I've noticed that there's a lot of missing citation. If your post doesn't have citation, you need to go back and cite by the deadline. Um, and then again, it's up to the student whether, if they don't read it, then that's on them. That's not, you've done your part. um, but again, I'm not, none of us are here to try to trick a student, or we're not waiting to see them fail. Giving them that feedback, and generally what will happen is that if you give them that feedback during LP1, I would say a good 75% of the time, you're not going to see that problem going on in LP3 or LP4. LP1 or LP2, you might see more issues, particularly with lack of citation. But if you make it clear that from the beginning that that's an expectation, and you reinforce that expectation by, leaving feedback on the discussion board about it, you'll see a steep decline in the number of uncited articles, or uncited posts. So the expectation is that you will post at least 10 times per week. 10 times is kind of standard. I know it's what University of Phoenix uses. So, and I'm not saying that you have to post 2 times a day, 5 times a week. I mean, it could very well be that on Monday nobody has posted anything. Tuesday, nobody has posted anything. It may be Wednesday or Thursday before anybody posts anything. Um, if that's what you're seeing, one of my posts would be on Tuesday saying, hey, let's get started, because I want to be able to give you feedback on your main post, and I'm not going to be online Saturday or Sunday. So if you want feedback from me, you need to get your post up by, like by Friday morning. That's my way of incentivizing early posting. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. So as a participant, you want to keep students on topic. I don't see a lot of digressions, but every once in a while you'll see people go off on a tangent. So you want to make sure that you're kind of reining them back in. Excuse me, using Socratic questioning to challenge students' critical thinking. If you see conflict or potential conflict, you're going to need to step in and kind of get people back on track. Um, Look for academic integrity issues. This is something that's you're really not going to have a lot of opportunity to do during LP1, but after you start grading the papers, because our students are pretty good about following the academic integrity rules on papers, because we use Turnitin. We don't have Turnitin on the discussion assignments, unfortunately. I've asked for it many times, but they insist that you cannot Turnitin on the discussion posts. So what happens is that that students are following and they're paraphrasing on the LPs, but then the discussion board becomes the Wild West. So if you see a student who writes poorly on their papers, but then suddenly they are, you know, my brain just completely blanked. They're Michael Porter writing about economics on the discussion assignment. You may want to take some of their post and run it through Google to see if it comes back as plagiarized, because we've definitely, this is something that we've seen more of, and we're working to fight. This is a different fire that we're fighting. We're not requiring that you run discussion assignments through a plagiarism checker, but we really do need faculty enforcing academic integrity. So it doesn't hurt to um, run someone's post through Google if you notice that, oh, suddenly their writing skills have improved immensely over their last paper. And other things that we noticed that happen, if you see someone in your class writing the word labor using British spelling, LABOUR, and that is usually a sign that there's something. Or if they're using like economize, but they're using an S rather than a Z, that's often a good indication that there might be something going on. And again, provide guidance for improvement. The rest of this I've already discussed. Okay, so with grading, I talked about the deadlines. So we want to make sure that your grading provides guidance. Basically, does your grading provide enough information that the student will do better, or can do better on their next paper? Whether they take your feedback or not is another discussion, and that is for me a great source of annoyance, because I go through a great deal of trouble to leave very detailed feedback, and it's very frustrating when you see the same thing over and over again. Um, and if you see that happening, contact me so that we can discuss it. And I can discuss with you your options, but then we also want to get the advisors to call the student and say, hey, your instructor is leaving you a lot of feedback. Why aren't you doing anything about it? Why aren't you accepting it and using it? So I don't, I totally understand the frustration of where it feels like you're talking to an empty room, because it's a lot to grade a paper and do a good job grading a paper takes a lot of work, and so I totally understand the frustration of doing that and then feeling like, okay, this person isn't even paying attention. So if you have that with a student, let us know so that we can get the student on the phone and find out why they're not using your feedback. Um, on the learning plans, these are the big assignments that are due every other week. So in some classes, in most classes, there'll be papers. In accounting, finance, stats, or quant, they're usually problems. We're also using more case studies. So case studies are usually part of the LP process. If you're using a lab like my accounting lab or my finance lab, what you would do is have the students take a copy of their results. Now they can do a screenshot, for instance, and then upload that into their Dropbox. And then you can just pull their grade off of that screenshot. I know that Pearson is working towards, and they said they would have it ready this fall. I don't know if they have it done or not, but I will check on this. Pearson told us that they're setting the lab up so that when a student does their assignment in the lab, the grade will flow from the lab into D2L. I have not seen that happen yet, so I don't know if they've actually done that. So for right now, until I can tell you that they have done that and I've actually seen it work, if you have a lab, please have the students take a screenshot of the results and put it in their Dropbox. And this serves two purposes. Number one, it updates their attendance, because participating on the discussion board or submitting an assignment both update attendance. Logging in does not update attendance. They have to actually submit something. So by having them submit the screenshot, it triggers their attendance update, and then it also saves you the trouble of having to go into the lab and tracking down their grades. With the other classes where you have a writing assignment, most of the classes will have a rubric that you can and should use, and I'll show you guys where that is. Um, and that's for the quantitative feedback. So you can choose, exemplary, and then you click on the box, or exceeds expectations, and you click on the box. I'll show you what that looks like. But in addition, the rubric only gives quantitative feedback. You'll need to give qualitative feedback as well. So you have a couple of options. There is a comment window in D2L that you can write all of your comments out on. I find that to be very, very labor intensive, and I don't find it to be very effective because you can say in that comment window, um, some of your stuff, some of your arguments don't make sense. Well, which arguments don't make sense? If you're going to tell them what doesn't make sense, you're going to be doing a lot of typing. It's easier just to go into the paper and put a comment in the paper where there are issues. So you can use the comment function in Word, but also GradeMark, which is part of the Turnitin package, is a really good resource for leaving feedback, and I've already created a video on how to do that. What's nice about GradeMark is that you can create your own comments and save them, and that way, I mean, there are a lot of preloaded comments, and they're great. Like for instance, if you have a student who has punctuation problems, you can grab the comma comment and drag it into the paper. And if the student will hover over the comment, there's a resource that will open that explains how to properly use commas. Um, if you are using GradeMark and you're creating your own comments, those comments will be there throughout the entire class. So um, I believe that, however, when you start a new class, you'll start over from just the pre-stored comments, and you'll have to build your comments over again. But I find GradeMark to be probably the most effective way. It's faster than typing out your comments in the window, and it's faster than the comment function. And I think that if you get students used to the idea of looking at their GradeMark report, it's going to help you leave better feedback faster. The test is the trick is going to be getting students to actually look at the comments. Um, Sorry, my PowerPoint's moving rather slowly. With discussions, you'll need to leave quantitative and qualitative feedback. So how many points are you deducting, and why are you deducting them? So with all grade assignments, please try to, number one, please try to use a student's name, just because it gives them, with online education, there is this distance that students feel from their instructors anyway, and so we want to try to bridge that distance. And one way of doing it that's very easy is just to simply use a student's name in your grading. So Jane, you have, your APA looks fantastic, or Steve, you have some really good points in this paper. That little bit helps personalize things. So try to provide at least one strength, if not a couple. I don't expect for you to identify everything they did well, but it does help, and it's encouraging, and it helps the constructive part of the criticism go down a little more smoothly. Make sure that you identify the deductions by point and reason. So for instance, if there's no title page, you might put no title page -5, or incorrect citation -2 points, or whatever. And then the last bullet point is something that I said on the other one, which is that you'll want to use the rubric if it's available, but then also provide some qualitative feedback, either using Microsoft Word comment function or using GradeMark. And I'll actually show you that the rubric itself, you can add comments to that. Um, that one is, I find it to be very easy to do. The difficult part on that one is getting students to read it. So, but I believe that there is a little button that you can click that will copy the rubric into the comment window. So I'll show you guys that shortly. Um, Please do not grade work where you have academic integrity concerns. So before you grade a paper, and this refers to the non-accounting finance classes, though in those classes the final assignment will be a paper, so you'll definitely need to pay attention to that. If you have case studies in your class, you'll need to pay attention to the turn-in report. Um, and if it's not an accounting, finance, or stats class, then you'll definitely want to pay attention to the Turnitin report. If there are any concerns about academic integrity, please do not grade the assignment. You'll need to send it to Graduate AI to be reviewed. Um, in some instances, you may come across a paper where you're like, I have no idea what this person is saying. There are so many writing errors, I cannot understand their meaning. In that case, we are beyond taking a 10% deduction for spelling, grammar, and punctuation. If the writing is such that it interferes with your ability to understand the content, we need that's a 911 situation. We need to get in touch with that student. We need to get them into tutoring. If that happens, if you come across a paper like that, please email Grad University Services at national.edu. Let them know who the student is, let them know what the assignment is, and I would also attach a copy of their paper to the email, or you can copy and paste the content into the body of an email. That way the advisors can get an idea of which option to give them, because we do have a couple of options. We have smart thinking um, tutoring, which helps with students who have higher level problems. Maybe it's punctuation or something like that. Then we have a writing tutor, and we also have writing tutors on all of the ground campuses, and they're available for more fundamental issues. So sending the advisors a sample of the writing will help them determine which option they need to steer the student towards. And I would definitely, from the beginning of class, I would encourage students to submit their rough drafts of their paper into their Dropbox a couple of days early so they can get their Turnitin score. I showed you guys a video, or I recorded a video yesterday on how to turn on Turnitin, and I want for you to turn it on using the little box that allows students to see their similarity score, because again, I'm not trying to hide anything from students. I'm not trying to set them up for failure. They have this available to them, and I want them to use it. So I encourage students, submit your paper to the Dropbox 48 to 72 hours before the deadline, so you can get your report back. You can look to make sure your similarity score is okay, and you can also look at GradeMark, because the GradeMark will put in comments regarding their writing, spelling, and punctuation, or grammar, spelling, and punctuation, and that can help students proofread their own papers. And again, that's probably going to be more helpful for students who are maybe just being a little bit careless, or I mean, it is a rough draft. If students have more fundamental writing problems, GradeMark is probably going to just be, it's not even going to be a band-aid. That we need to get them to into tutoring. But for students where that maybe they're just being a little bit sloppy, or it's just part of the rough draft, because I can tell you my rough drafts always have missing words or the same word twice in a row, because it's a rough draft. But it can help them tweak the rough draft so that it is a more finished final product. Okay, so Turnitin and academic integrity. The threshold for a Turnitin score is 20%. Which means that 80% of the content in a student's paper should be original, so it should be either their own words or their own ideas, or it should be paraphrased. They are allowed up to 20% for direct quotes. I will tell you straight off the bat, I discourage quoting from my students. Even my freshman students, I'm like, I would rather see no quotes than one quote. And that's just because part of demonstrating mastery of the material is being able to paraphrase. I mean, I can quote in Swahili. I don't know what I'm saying, but I know how to use quotation marks. And if you don't enforce or really encourage the idea of paraphrasing over quoting, you'll get students who will rely too heavily on quotes. If the paper is more than 20% quoted material, contact me. There are a couple of options that you have, um, but I don't want to reward a student for relying on quotations too heavily by grading that work and, grading it for full credit. If 30% of the paper is quoted material, it's overquoted, and they should not get a hundred. They should not be eligible for full credit if a third if excuse me, if a third of their paper is direct quotes. I mean, there are other students out there who are working hard to paraphrase and to demonstrate to you that they know the material by paraphrasing. So it's not fair for them to work so hard to paraphrase and to get the same score as somebody who's like, I'm just going to quote here and quote there. Um, so again, if you feel that the student is relying too heavily on quotes, if they're exceeding that 20% threshold, let me know, because that's also an opportunity for us to talk to the student and to explain to them why we have the 20% cutoff and what they should be doing instead. Sometimes you'll get a paper that has a similarity score that's like 21% or 28%, and a lot of times it's not over quoting. Oftentimes, the reason their similarity score is in the 20% or maybe even 30 something percent. If you look at the paper and the paper is really short and the reference page is really long, that can be a reason for having a high similarity score. So I don't want for you to say, or I don't want for you to go, 21%, I'm not grading this. There is a gray area where we have to look at why the score is what it is. And that's usually somewhere in the 20 to 35%. And there's a way that you can go into Turnitin and recalculate their similarity score by omitting their reference page. And that will give you a more accurate similarity score. Um, if a student has a high similarity score on their first paper and you want to allow them to revise it, that's fine. I wouldn't allow more than one revision, and I would definitely take an opportunity for on that first revision to really get the student doing something to fix their deficiency on Turnitin. And one thing that we've been doing is that Indiana University Bloomington has a wonderful um, test on paraphrasing and how to properly paraphrase. And at the end of it, you take it. They show you exercises. You do exercise. They show you examples. You do some exercises, and then you take a quiz. And there's a quiz for undergrad, and there's a quiz for graduate. And at the end of it, when you pass it, you get a certificate. So what we want to do is, if there's a deficiency in understanding paraphrasing versus quoting, we want them to go to that website. We want them to go through the activities and we want them to take that test. And we want them to pass that test. And so, uh, if you are going to let someone revise an assignment because their first paper had a high similarity score, we want them to go through that process because otherwise, it's not fair to the students who did it right the first time. That student, in order to be able to revise, they need to actively work on whatever that deficiency is. And so if you have a student that where you have any concerns about academic integrity, email graduate university or sorry, email graduateai at national.edu, and I will work with the advisors. The advisors will get in touch with the student, and counsel them on paraphrasing and direct them towards that website. I will deal with the uglier part of it, I guess, or the corrective measure. What I usually do is I usually give a written warning the first time, and then after that, if I give them a written warning, the advisors will have them or will direct them to that website, and they'll need to earn that certificate. And that way, if it happens again, it goes straight to an F for the paper, the next paper, or a zero for the next paper. But we don't like to just punish students. We want to offer them help on fixing the problem. And that way we know that if we see it again, that it's a student being either lazy or dishonest. It's not because we've let them down. We don't want them to be operating under deficiencies if we can help them do that. But of course, we can lead them to water. We can't make them drink. So um, when it comes down to it, if you have any questions, any concerns, it's better to contact me. And because what we do, this graduate AI email address, we try to handle the academic integrity issues from an administrative level so that you're not arguing with students all quarter long, because I've been an instructor and I've enforced academic integrity and I have been harassed by students before, and I don't want you to have to deal with that. We'll deal with the warnings, we'll deal with the violations, but you have to let us know about it. That's all we're asking, is that you inform us. And NAU has a no resubmit policy. So if a student has taken a class before, they cannot resubmit work from their previous attempt without getting permission from you first. We generally discourage students from resubmitting work because if you are retaking the class, something didn't go right the first time. But if it's a paper for the same class, like you're teaching MT 6300 and they took it last quarter and they want to resubmit the same paper, if you're okay with that, you can allow them to do that. Just email me so that I can go back and look at the similarity score on their first submission. If there was a problem on their first submission, then I can let you know, hey, you probably don't want to take this. So if a student emails you and says, hey, I've taken this class before, can I resubmit work? Let me know so I can verify the similarity score on the first submission. They cannot submit a paper from one class to another. So if they've taken MT 6300 and they're now taking, which is a human resources class, and they're now taking another HR class and they want to submit the same paper from MT 6300 into MT 6310, no. That's double dipping, that's self plagiarism, and that's not acceptable. They've got to start from scratch like everybody else in class. Okay, so some final thoughts on grading. Please grade accurately. Like any other school, we see grade inflation, and we see grade inflation from particular instructors, and I don't want that to be any of you because it's if we're seeing grade inflation, it's going to come out on your quarterly reviews, and if you get a bad quarterly review, you can expect not to teach the next quarter. And if you get two bad quarterly reviews, you can expect not to teach again. Um, I showed you guys on the last video how one of the problems that we see, well, there's a lot of grade inflation on discussion assignments. So please make sure that you're looking at, are they supporting their answers? Is their citation correct? Are there any writing errors? Are they posting on different days? Do they have enough posts? Fortunately, you'll only be dealing with two discussion assignments every 2 weeks, so monitoring that should not be difficult, but it's really important for you to enforce it. Grade inflation hurts everybody except for the person who's inflating the grades, which I find to be ironic and unfortunate. Yeah, if I'm inflating grades, my life is easy, but I've done nothing to help the student. In fact, I've only damaged the student because now the student thinks that they are a fantastic writer. They're going to go on to their next class, they're going to do the exact same thing, and that next instructor may not be a great inflator. That next instructor may be somebody who very diligently grades. That student is going to have a very, very rude awakening, and it's not that instructor's fault. It's my fault. So essentially, what I'm doing is I'm just passing the buck if I'm inflating grades. I'm just going to post a zero. The student is happy, but they are delusional. And then the next instructor is going to be battling that student all quarter long because that student now thinks that they are a great writer and that the next instructor is being unfair. So that's why our policy is if you're inflating grades, you get 1 quarter to correct it, and then the next quarter, if it happens again, there's no second chances. I've seen too many of instructors thrown under the bus by other faculty members because that first faculty member just did not take the time to do their job correctly. Again, I mentioned this before. You can allow students to resubmit, but I would limit the number of resubmits that you allow, and I would definitely make sure the student has to earn that resubmit by doing something to correct the deficiency in the first place. If you're allowing them to resubmit because of a high similarity score, they need to do some work with their advisors or in the writing lab on academic integrity. If you allow them to resubmit because they didn't follow instructions the first time, I would make them come to office hours and bring their revision and make them go through their revision with you and to have them show you their improvements. Um, it's for me fair. I mean, we know life is not fair, but I don't like to see students get special treatment because they're not following instructions. That to me makes absolutely no sense. Because then the students who are doing things correctly the first time, what are we doing for them? We can't give them extra points because we don't have extra credit. So if you're going to allow a student to resubmit, as far as I'm concerned, they should have to earn that by doing something to rectify the reason or the problem that made them ask for the resubmit in the first place. And then the last one on this point, the last thought about grading is 100% is pretty rare. I mean, on an exam, it's pretty easy to determine because exams are, A or B, true or false, multiple choice. But with papers, um, I'm not saying that that your grades need to follow a bell-shaped curve at the end of a learning plan or the end of class. And in a graduate program, you're going to expect more A's and B's than you would C's. But if there are writing errors, if there are writing errors, if there are citation errors, if there are errors in logic, if there are things that they did not include, if there are things that they only partially included but they really needed to focus on more, you need to take deductions. That's part of grading, and grading, if in my opinion, is the least enjoyable part of teaching, but it's also, particularly online, it's going to be the most critical part of helping students improve. So I'm not saying that you're never going to have 100% because there are some students who are just exceptional students. They write really well, they proofread really well, they give 110% on absolutely everything. But are those students the norm? No. No, those you may have one student a quarter who is like that, or one student in each class who's like that, or you may have classes where no one's like that. Um, but don't diminish the significance and the accomplishment that goes with 100% by giving them to everyone. We don't have extra credit. You can't go back to that student with the really great paper and give them an extra 5%. You know, that's not an option. So when you grade, please grade thoughtfully, and provide them with the feedback and the explanation for why you took the errors. So maybe their next paper really will be 100% paper if they're using your feedback. Okay, so a couple of best practices. I post what I call my rules of engagement in the classroom on the first day of class, or actually the day before the first day of class. These are all the things that have been problems in the past and that I want students to know from the beginning. For instance, on the discussion board in my class, you are not allowed to attach anything to a discussion board assignment. Period. If a student attaches something to a if they attach their answer rather than putting it in the body of the post, I tell them I will not grade it. And the reason is because that's how viruses are spread, is through attachments. So I have, NAU IT support to clean up my computer if I get a virus. And students do have some support, but I, I don't want to take them out of circulation for a week trying to resolve a virus. So things like that. In my rules of engagement, I stress the importance of again, no attachments. I definitely stress the importance of meeting deadlines. I'm very strict about deadlines at the undergraduate level. I stress the importance of communication with students. If a student asks me for an extension in advance of the deadline, I'll probably give it to them. If they ask me for an extension the day after an assignment was posted, I will not give it to them. They'll have to provide me with documentation that shows that they could not possibly have submitted that assignment when it was due, in order for me to give them an extension. So I'm not saying you need to be that hardcore about it, but this past summer we've had a problem with a lot of students submitting work late, and week after week after week. This is a graduate program. These people are supposed to be managers, and if they can't meet deadlines, what are the chances their employees ever will? Um, so with deadlines, have a policy and follow the policy. And if your policy is that, you turn your work in on time, or you provide me with documentation, I don't think that's unreasonable. You're probably going to have students fighting with you on that, and you can contact me if they have issues with that. But we've been overly generous in the past about deadlines, and I know that undergrad is overly generous with extensions. For me, I'm not so. I don't worry too much about extensions, because usually an extension is something where a student has communicated to me in advance. It's the turning stuff in late and then asking for more time, or asking me to waive late penalties after the fact. That shows no sense of responsibility or no sense of accountability. So if they ask for you an extension in advance and you're okay with it, then by all means. But if they turn into something late and then ask you for an extension, maybe once that would be permissible. But if you start seeing a pattern, we need to do something about that. Please personalize your room. Include a photo when you post your bio for the beginning of class. It doesn't have to be. Don't put your CV up there. It doesn't have to be really formal. My picture in my classroom is a picture of my dog. So, you one thing that is a problem for online is that there is this sense of detachment, or there's not a sense of community between students and instructors. So, take the time to try to build that. I had instructors who would post their top 100 movies, which, again, you don't have to do anything like that, but it is a way to kind of build a little bit of a relationship with students. Um, Definitely, if you see news stories that you think are relevant to your topic, bring them into the discussion assignment, because that is a way for students to see relevance between what they're learning and what's going on in the real world. You're the subject matter expert. Feel free, and I encourage you to draw upon your own experiences in your field on the discussion assignments as well. Socratic questioning, again, I've mentioned that before. Um, One thing on the discussion assignments, please try to give all students a little bit of attention. So during a learning plan, if you have 20 students, try to apply to each student at least once so they don't feel that they're being ignored. And then, as I said before, try to provide suggestions on how to improve posts on the discussion assignments. And if you see something happening over and over with students, the best way to do it is just either to send them an email saying, hey, I've noticed a lot of missing citation. Don't forget, if you don't cite, I can't grade it because it's an academic integrity violation. That usually gets their attention. Um, but again, I'm trying to I try to help students improve rather than waiting for them to fail. So, and last slide. I can never do these things in less than an hour. Sorry about that. Again, if you're going to allow them to revise, please limit the number of revisions. Always check the similarity scores before you start grading. When I review you, one of the things I will look at is I'm going to look at the drop boxes and I'm going to look at similarity scores. If there are high similarity scores, I'm going to look at that turn in report and find out why. And if you graded that student for full credit and they had academic integrity violations, that student will get an academic integrity violation, and then you will get marked down on your review for ignoring or not enforcing academic integrity. So what I do is when I go to grade the papers, the first thing I do is I go to the Dropbox, I look at all the I look for similarity scores. Any high similarity scores, those are the ones I deal with first. So what you would do is if you see a high similarity score, look at the report, find out why. If there are academic integrity issues, email Graduate AI and attach the turn-in report, and then I will take over from there. If you look at the report and you're like, I don't really know why this is high, do the same process anyway. If you look at the person's report and you see, okay, they have a 40% similarity score, but it's because their paper is only 1,000 words and their reference page is 3 pages long, then you know then I go in and recalculate their Turnitin score. By omitting their reference page, and that should bring their similarity score down into the normal range. If it doesn't and there are still issues, please let me know. Um, you know, Follow the same protocol. And we do, and it's important that we use the Graduate AI because I am sending out warnings, and those, if I send out a warning in your class and they do the same thing in their next class, it's going to be an academic integrity violation the second time. These things carry over from class to class, and I need to be able to track them, and that's why I need to be part of the process so that, maybe they didn't plagiarize in your class, but they did in 3 other classes. I, I'm the only person who's going to know that, and I only know that because you guys let me know. If a student asks for an extension, again, if it's the first one, feel free to grant them the extension. If you see a pattern arising, email the advisors because this may be something where we're dealing with this from class to class to class, and we need to figure out what's going on with the student, and we need to put a stop to it. It's not fair to those students who are managing their time and getting their work in on time if we're continuously giving extensions to certain students time and time again. If you're dealing with an individual student issue, like for instance, a particular grade for a student, or if one student has an issue with an assignment, please contact the advisors. I don't have time to deal with individual student issues, but The advisors are definitely, they're wonderful. I cannot say enough about Christina and Bridget. They are so incredibly helpful. Um, and they can help you deal with they can help you deal with the issues for an individual student. If you're seeing issues that are affecting more than one student, then let me know, because there may be a problem with the curriculum or with a policy or with a procedure, and that is something that I need to be involved in. But individual student issues, you can just email the advisors. And one last thing I would consider, particularly for those students where you see a huge or a significant disparity between the quality of writing on their papers and the quality of writing on their discussion assignments, you might want to think about doing some random plagiarism checks on their discussion assignments by copying and pasting their content and putting into Google to see if you get any hits back. All right, that is it for this video. 1 minute and 1 minute, 1 hour and 1 minute. So there'll probably be a couple more videos coming, but they will not be this long. Thank you.